Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Jana Gillis. I am a behavior and mental health consultant at the Lester B. Pearson School Board and also a member of the Center of Excellence for Mental Health. Thank you for being here this evening.
So I'm Zmira King. I'm a psychologist with the Lester B. Pearson School Board, and I'm also a member of the Center of Excellence for Mental Health. I've been working for many years with families, with children of different ages, both in elementary and in high school. And welcome to you all.
Thank you. Jana, did you want to say a few words before we get started?
Okay. Well, actually, I just wanted to say, just thank you to everyone for coming this evening. You know, as parents ourselves, Zmira and I, we can appreciate the challenge of stepping away from family routines and obligations at this time of the evening. So your presence is greatly appreciated. And our time is quite limited this evening. So Zmira and I are just going to share sort of an overview with you for the next 20 minutes or so. And then, as Ben mentioned, we'll open things up for discussion so we can sort of ask questions and maybe elaborate a bit more. So I guess I want to start off by saying that I think it's really important to acknowledge that the impact that this pandemic is having on us as individuals, as parents, as families, the impact it's having on our children, it's real. It's been a long time. You know, we just found out yesterday that this partial lockdown that we've been living is going to be extended for another 4 weeks. So, you know, initially we were going to be home and out of school for 2 weeks, and now we're going on 8 months of this. And there is a cumulative effect to that. So, you know, spending prolonged amounts of time experiencing losses and disappointments and the overall stressors of living through a pandemic can compound feelings of stress and anxiety. And I think we're sort of collectively getting tired, and in some cases we're feeling worn down by all of this. And those stressors are valid and challenging, you know, be it the vast array of challenges that we are experiencing, whether it's, you know, caring for elderly or ill family members, experiencing the death of a loved one, you know, whether that's COVID related or not. There's been loss of employment, the loss and disappointments that come with milestones that have been missed, you know, for ourselves and for our kids, like graduations, proms, sporting events. You know, many of us have missed out on weddings and births and birthdays and family vacations, and you know, the list can really go on. And these losses are significant and they are legitimate. And I think it's just important to mention that it's okay to give ourselves permission, to give our children permission to grieve these losses. You know, obviously both death losses and non-death losses, because this really is a long time to live with uncertainty, uncertainty about where this is all going. And like us, you know, our kids have lots of questions, and they really do sort of look to us to answer those questions, which is not always an easy thing. You know, questions like, when will this end? When will school return to normal? When will we see family and friends again in a way that we used to? When will we play sports again? You know, and questions like, will I get sick? What happens if you get sick? You know, and this kind of uncertainty can elevate our stress level in us and in our kids. So if you or your kids or other members of your family or friends are feeling overwhelmed these days, you know, with good reason, you know, by nature of what we are living, this is stressful. And the purpose is actually not to eliminate the stress from our lives, which might sound counterintuitive, but really it's not possible to eliminate stress from our lives, even during a pandemic, or certainly during a pandemic, but rather it's really about how do we find a balance? You know, how do we manage and cope with all that we are living? You can go to the next slide, please, Ben. And I think it's important that despite these incredibly challenging times we are living, that our children are living, we have many, many strengths, skills, and resources and strategies, you know, that we are accessing every single day that are helping us to manage. You know, they're helping us to cope and to remain resilient in the face of all of this. I mean, what is our number at? You know, we're over 50 people here right now participating in this webinar. You know, this tells me that you as individuals are not only resourceful, but you care deeply about your children and your families, and you're looking for something that can be helpful. And we tend to skip over that stuff, the stuff that we're doing well, the things that are working a little bit for us. And that's because we really are wired to see sort of what's not working, be it in ourselves, in our kids, in others. And this makes sense because there is something adaptive about that. We need to be scanning our world and noticing concerns and problems. But too much of that, even during a pandemic, when it's expected, is not always helpful. And because we are managing this, to some degree, we are all managing this. It is helpful to notice how we are doing that, you know, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's some days more than others, right? So what we notice, the questions we ask ourselves and our children, they're important. The way we frame them, that's important. And that's where we can really rediscover how strong and resourceful we are, which can help us to build more resilience and increase our ability to cope. You know, and though we've never been through anything like this, that's for sure, but we have weathered storms of different types. And we pull from those experiences to help us, you know, manage in these current experiences. So I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work here as participants. I would like to ask you a few questions to get you thinking about what is working for you. What is working for your families? Because as I said, I know there are a lot of good things that you are doing that are making a difference. So I'm going to invite you to respond in the chat, and we're going to read out some of those responses. And these are just some, you know, helpful questions that we can ask ourselves. And I encourage you to ask your children some of these questions and see what comes of them. So on the next slide, Ben, of the questions, I'm going to jump to the second one, actually, the second point, and it is, you have faced a lot of challenges lately. Your children have faced a lot of challenges lately. What do you do that makes things a little bit easier? Even if it's just a little bit. These don't have to be grand things, okay? When we think about the little things that make a difference for us, what are some of those things? Having a routine.
We have having a routine, more time together since so much has been canceled, time for deeper conversations. Make sure to spend time with my girls reading most nights to let them know they get some alone time with me. Going outside, taking family walks, taking walks in nature, open communication, hiking, trying to find a work-life balance. Telling the truth. Outdoors, physical activity. Drive my kids to see their friends that are in their pods. Spending time outdoors. A lot of people spending time outdoors, lots of family activities, FaceTime with friends and family, managing expectations.
Big ones, good ones. Maybe I could also ask, what are you most proud of in the last week? Maybe it's something your child has done lately that makes you proud. Maybe it's something that you have done lately that you can be brave enough to brag about in the chat and tell us about.
They spend more quality time together, keeping active by going for walks or doing stuff that makes you active.
That's a really important one, that, you know, and it's nice to see all of the comments about getting outdoors and being physically active and the help that does provide us. getting my teen to come on a bike ride with me. Well done. You should be proud of that. Getting good grades online. Yeah.
Took a nap when she needed it.
Yeah.
Jennifer took a nap when she needed it.
You know, and maybe maybe one more question is, you know, how do you keep things from getting worse? You know, sometimes when we look at it as this is really tough and it is a struggle, how do I keep things from getting worse? How do I contribute in a way that at least keeps it where it's at now and it doesn't sort of fall into a different sort of space? Disconnect from news and media, big one.
This is what I'm doing to keep things from getting worse.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Constant and regular check-ins with the kids, spend quality time outside, disconnect from screens, live in the present, stop thinking about what if. Relax and knit.
Well, I want to thank you for your responses because, you know, when we speak of these experiences in terms of what we're doing that's helpful, what we're doing, you know, that makes a difference, it provides a sense of competency. It provides us a sense of control in a time that's very, very much out of our control. It can provide a sense of hope and a sense of accomplishment. And not only for, you know, hearing ourselves say these things, but also hearing what others are doing too, can really help to sort of encourage us and guide us. So I'm going to pass it on to Zmira, and she's going to continue to discuss further.
You should be on now.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, we do.
So I just want to start by saying that so many good comments were there. I am wondering if I'm going to be able to add much to all the wonderful things that you are all doing. And I hope I can contribute a little bit more. So yeah, the first thing I wanted to emphasize yet again is how normal it is, all the stress we are feeling. And so it's no surprise that our kids are going to be feeling some stress too. And really, kids are different, so some may be feeling it more than others, and we have to keep in mind that some kids take longer to adjust and adapt to different things in their lives differently, and you might even have kids in your own family, you know, two siblings who are showing very different ways that they're adapting and managing this pandemic. It does depend on their age, depends on their personality, it may depend on other circumstances, if you have a child with special needs or a child who has experienced other setbacks in their lives that have nothing to do with this. So we do have to be very mindful on how we approach kids who are experiencing that difficulty to adjust and adapt. And I will be mentioning a little bit more on that a little later for you to pay attention to what are the things that we are worried about that will help you figure out whether you do need to maybe get some extra help for your child. Now, the next point I want to mention is really about I want to give some peace of mind to parents tonight, if that's the one thing I can do. And that is to let you know that for all those parents who are worrying and fretting, am I doing it right? Am I you know, always making the right decision when I decide to change something in my routine? Am I saying the right thing? Am I allowing my kid too much or too little in this time? The truth is, kids don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be ordinary, good parents. And what do I mean by that? Really, kids in general just need, and not only in pandemic times, but in general, they need to have parents who love them a lot, who offer them guidance and support and nurture them and are basically there for them. And that really is the basic aspect of how they're going to be feeling, even in a time of difficulty. They need to know that you are there for them and that you're doing the best that you can. And the reality is that sometimes you will make mistakes, and we don't have all the answers, and tempers will be lost. I know they happen to me occasionally, but if these things happen, it's okay, because what they will also see is that you will pull yourself together at some point, you find answers to some of the questions, you try to correct mistakes, you go on workshops in the evening to try and figure out what else to do, and you keep going, and you move forward. And like you were saying, we keep one foot in front of the other, and keeping it all together. At the end of the day, even if it's, we have bad moments, we are still here and we are still functioning. So that's something I'd like you all to keep in mind. So how do we notice if our child is struggling to a point that we really need to maybe seek some professional help or some guidance? So you know your child best. You know how they function in different situations. You know how they were before the pandemic. So what I usually ask parents to do is to look for ongoing, sustained changes in their behavior, in their emotional reactions, things that were uncharacteristics to them and that are really different than the way they were before. Or if they had some kind of behavior difficulties or some minor emotional reactions to stresses, are they now much more intense, much more ongoing in terms of lasting longer and unable to get out of that situation? Now, we have to be mindful that we do expect some reactions from kids when there are changes in their lives and very profound changes. And, obviously a lot of kids may have had reactions at the beginning, but what we're looking for is those reactions that do not go away, that they're not stable, they're not going back to baseline, and maybe even becoming worse. And those are the things that may be something to be concerned about. And I'll just give a couple of examples. For example, a child who is becoming very clingy, very difficult to separate, may have very strong temper tantrums around separation, and you're not seeing any change in that behavior. Another example is a child who may be very aggressive and was not aggressive to that extent before, maybe will be very oppositional, and you're having a hard time controlling these behaviors. And of course, we want to look for just general changes in our children, like difficulty sleeping, that's a big one. Difficulty concentrating, that could be something that we actually seen quite a bit with children. Excessive fears, and just generally difficulty functioning in their everyday life that you did not notice before in your child. And I do have a slide at the end with some resources, and I hope that they will be helpful for you if you do need to address this and seek help. And I'll address it again later. So we can move to the next slide then, please. Thank you. So how do we help our children cope? So I'll remind you that I've selected some points that I think are general, but are also very, very important for all parents to do. And I know some of you may have kids of different ages, and some of you may have kids with special needs. And to some extent, we have to modify how we do things when we have different ages and definitely kids with special needs. So keep in mind that this is a general strategies that we do have to sometimes maybe tweak as we go along, depending on our child. So the one thing I want to start with is that when your child is feeling upset, when your child is showing that they're upset, they might not even be saying it, but they're expressing it in some way, they're disappointed, they're frustrated, they're sad. It's very important to show empathy and to validate their feelings. We often want to just kind of take it away from them. We want to take the sadness and the frustration away. And we may say things like, oh, it's okay, things will be better, or let's go do something else, or don't think about it. It's not so bad. Some people have it worse, right? However, these things might not always be very helpful. And sometimes we have to recognize that everyone wants to feel heard and validated, and everybody's pain and sadness is real to them and legitimate to them, and needs to be acknowledged, at least to some extent. For younger kids, you might actually even want to label their feelings for them. They might be showing it, and you may want to use words. I can see you're feeling disappointed because you can't go and see your grandparents or your friends. I can see that you're mad because, again, we have to do these things that you're not used to doing. And by doing that, you are, in a sense, supporting them, just by giving them that kind of emotional empathy. And really, you're sharing their pain with them, and that's quite big for children. However, having said that, I also encourage parents to problem solve with their kids, right? So after you've shown your empathy and they felt heard, maybe it's time to kind of help your child discover some solution, find out for themselves what they can do about how they're feeling. And sometimes it might not be something they can actually fix at that moment, but it could be something simple as, making them come up with the idea that maybe they can find something else to do, or maybe they just have to experience this feeling that they don't like, and just put it there in there, and live with it for maybe this evening, and then we can address it again tomorrow. Just revisit it in another day when things are a little bit more clear for them or for you. And that's okay, because now they've been heard, now they've shared their pain a little bit, and maybe it's easier to do that. And that brings me to the over reassuring that we often want to do with our kids. We have to be mindful not to overly reassure them. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't reassure them and give them some reassurance about the situation and about how things are. But to constantly and regularly do that is not always very helpful. Our instinct is to jump to the rescue and to take the sadness away and to fix things. But if we do that constantly, we risk having kids who don't necessarily know how to deal with those unpleasant situations and unpleasant emotions because they haven't had a chance to do so. It's been done for them. So in a sense, you want to guide them if they're very young or if they're not capable of doing it themselves, and then slowly teach them how they can actually figure out themselves sometimes, how they can reassure themselves, what they can do in order to deal with this particular frustration they're feeling or in this situation that's challenging. This is basically what we mean when we say we teach kids resilience, right? These are the kind of things that we do when we want to help kids develop that resilience that we often talk about. So if your child maybe asks you, is everything going to be fine? Or are we going to go back to normal next week or in 3 months? And we don't really have the answer to that. And even though we want to say, yes, it's going to be just fine, the better way to maybe, or the more appropriate way to approach it with your child is to say something like, well, maybe things won't be back to normal very soon, but will we be managing? Yes, we will manage. Will we get through this? Most probably we will get through this. Will we still be able to have fun and handle the situation? Most likely we'll be able to do that. And that's giving them the sort of the message that while things are tough and that you have no guarantees on how things will be in the future, you are still going to be okay. And things don't have to necessarily be fixed in order for us to be okay. We will find a way to get through that. That's role modeling to them how you are also approaching this situation, which is another way we teach kids resilience. In the same way that we talk about connecting to your child and resilience, this comes almost together. If you are going to support your child and show empathy and be able to do this problem solving, you do need to connect with your child. They need to feel that they can open up to you and listen to you and share with you. So the connection becomes very important within all these kind of things that we suggest parents to do. And what does it mean to connect? Well, you've weighed in quite a bit on the chat. You go out, you spend time with your kids, you're reading to them, you're doing things with them maybe more even than you did before. And that's the way we connect with kids. We listen to them, we show interest in what they are saying, we show interest in the things that they want to play with and do. And that allows us then to buffer some of the stress that they are feeling. They're feeling connected to you. They're feeling that they're able to share with you. And that can be very helpful for kids once they are facing that moment when they need your support. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is the balance between how we need to shift and change and maybe kind of do things somewhat differently, because that's what we're doing all the time, but also the need to remember that we have certain things that kids still need in their lives, and there's some things that have not changed. For example, the routines. Kids need routine, even though the routine may be different. Your kids still need a routine. This is very important for their stability and for their development. They still need limit setting in some form. So while we try to balance that, that's not an easy balance to do. Every family is different, every situation is different. But if we keep in mind that we still need to figure out how we can be flexible, but yet remain with those kind of fixed routines and stability in our children's life, then we're providing them with that structure that they definitely need at this time when things seem to be changing and shifting and uncertain almost constantly. So I still have lots and lots to say, but in the interest of time, I think maybe we will move on to your questions and try and answer if you have any questions, any comments, if you want me to elaborate on anything. I think this would be a good time to do so.
Great, thank you very much. And I want to thank you both for, really, Jana for doing things around gratitude, thinking about the different strategies of things we appreciate, and Zmira for, really pulling apart things like empathy and ways that we could speak to empathy with our children in terms of sentence stems and things like that. As a parent, these are things that are very helpful to me. So as Debbie has put in the chat, we do invite you to write your questions in the chat, and then they will be read out. And we're going to invite our two speakers to discuss them and offer ideas and engage in that type of discussion. So I do want to encourage you to ask any questions you have now. Perhaps I'll start out with some of the questions that we had received from email. One of the questions that we'll start off with is just around friendship with teens and our children. So it's generally a question around, is it okay to focus being more of a friend to our child, but also how do we keep the balance between the role of a parent and role of a friend? So if you have any insight around that. So Daniel, if you could just maybe delete Jen, unmute Zmira and Jenna.
I am muted now?
Yes.
Okay, I can go on. Okay, so this is actually what I was just trying to convey in like 2 sentences before. This is one of the things that when we're talking about balance. We do feel like our kids are a little isolated, and we want to provide them a little bit of that social and fun time that they had with their kids, with their friends, and now they may be spending more time with us, and sometimes those boundaries can kind of be a little bit, shifted, right? And it's okay to spend more time with your child, and it's okay if you want to game with them, something that you may have never done before, or talk to them more about things that may be of interest with them. But I don't think that to take the role of a friend will be that easy for them anyway. I think they need to see you as a parent. They need you to be there in that role, because they actually need you even more so at that role right now than any other time, because you are their guide. You're going to be the person who is going to be able to help them when they are feeling stress and when things maybe will get difficult for them. So I don't think you can replace their friends and suddenly become their friend, but you can do things with them that maybe their friends were doing with them that can allow them to still have that that maybe joy that they were experiencing before. If they don't have anyone to do that with, it could be you, but you're still a parent. I think that's an important thing to remember, that they need you as their parent. Yeah.
Thank you. Jenna, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, very well said, Zmira, and really just to echo what you said, that there is that fine line, as Zmira pointed out, and I think as parents, unlike friendships, there is a hierarchy there, and it's not meant to be, that term's not meant to be used in a negative way. It's really necessary that children can to look to us as that guide, unlike friendships that are more of an equal kind of relationship. So we've probably noticed times where when we kind of develop more of a friendship relationship with our children, it's more difficult to then revert back into our parenting role when necessary, and it's of course necessary. So yeah, I agree with what Zmira said.
Great, thank you. So I see there's a question on the chat, which I'll paraphrase a little bit, and it really speaks to, I guess, motivation in school. The question is, my son is in grade 10, and I'm finding it hard to encourage him to study and keep up with his schooling. I feel like he just doesn't care as much this year doing one day in school and online the others. Do you have any insight around ways to motivate students in their studies or focus less time on his phone or kind of on non-school related screen?
Jana, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because I think part of what's happening is it's not easy to be in the situation that our children are in, our youth are in, particularly with this sort of one day at school, one day not. It's challenging, and as parents, we've to see that and to see our children sort of disengaged in their learning is not easy. Something that you might be able to sort of to speak about with your youth is to see sort of what would need to happen, in order for them to sort of be able to be more engaged. Do they have a schedule sort of set up? Do they have a routine? I think a lot of times our youth they're feeling a lot of there's a real lack of control right now in our teens' lives, in our kids' lives, and how can we sort of infuse some of that control? Is there a schedule that can be set up where they really are able to sort of carve out and devote time to their learning, and maybe even to ask the question about what's getting in the way, to have that sort of honest conversation about acknowledging how difficult this is. It's not easy to be, an engaged learner right now. And what would help your son to be able to engage a little bit more? Be curious what they would have to say about that. Zmira, do you want to add to that?
The only thing else that I would add is because a lot of the online learning, I have noticed that there are some students, not all of them, but quite a few, who do say that the inability to concentrate online is quite profound for them. And even though they might be kids who have not had difficulty usually paying attention in class, when it comes to sitting in front of Zoom, I mean, they do find it very, very difficult. They're also expected to do more on their own when they're doing the online courses, right? The teachers often give them more independent work. So I'm wondering if there is any way to reach out to their teachers and say that this is what's happening to your child. They're having a hard time concentrating online. Would they be able to have any notes given ahead of time that will help the child concentrate while they will have the notes in paper? That might be helpful. Or some other guidance that they can offer regarding certain things that they're about to teach that will give you a little bit more of a way in on how you can support your child in terms of structuring him around what he needs to learn.
Mhm.
So I know that some teachers are able to do that and they're very helpful. So that would be something you may want to consider with the
And
school.
maybe just to add to that, I know we maybe, when we have older kids, we maybe have gotten away from really assisting them with their work because they've been pretty sufficient learners. And given the circumstances that we're living in, I wonder if, some of our kids don't need some help kind of going back to breaking down the tasks. I think about the work I do with my, 10-year-old who doesn't have the skill set of a student in grade 10. So it really requires my help to break down the tasks and manage those tasks. And it's almost more of like an organizational piece, because when we are overwhelmed, when we're feeling disconnected, those executive functioning skills, we call them, these skills that we use to organize and plan and sort of stay on task, become more difficult. So perhaps, helping your son to break down those tasks. So, when in terms of making a schedule, maybe that's partly really highlighting what little chunks they can do at a time to make it sort of less overwhelming when they look at it all at once.
And often that is something you may want to explore. Often kids who are struggling emotionally tend to have difficulty concentrating. If your child may be having difficulty concentrating that they did not have before, you may want to explore if there are any emotional issues that he's experienced or she's experiencing that may be contributing to that. And they haven't maybe shared it with you and maybe haven't been ready to open up to you. And that conversation may be something quite revealing, and it's something to try.
Great, thank you very much for all those insights. It's amazing how one question can lead to so many tips. It is really wonderful. I'm just going to share another question that we got in previous to the webinar starting, and it's a story of a family that had lost a few members due to COVID, and not due to COVID, but the parent is concerned about their children because they're having a difficult time processing with loss. So given that we're in social distancing right now, do you have any insight or tips around how immediate family can help their children process the loss of a beloved grandmother, for example, in times where we're not able to kind of hug and just see other people the way that we normally do?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And whoever did write that question, my condolences to you and your family. It's a lot of loss that you have experienced over this time. And it's a really good question. How do we help our children process the death of a beloved family member? I think it's important to recognize that we can help to process these losses by maybe first recognizing that the sadness, the longing, the emotional upset is part of coping, and it is part of processing the death of someone that's close to us. So as painful as that is for us, as painful as that is to see, being expressed from our children, it is a very natural and normal way to express our grief. And no doubt these circumstances that we're living have sort of robbed us of the rituals and the ability to come together as families, as friends, as communities, to mourn and to express these feelings of grief in a way that we typically do, in a way that's expected. And that can kind of disrupt our grieving process. That being said, when it comes to sort of helping our children specifically address the loss of a loved one, I always suggest to parents that, it's really helpful just to meet our child where they're at, regardless of their age, regardless of their abilities. Whatever they're feeling, we want to give them a chance to sort of express that and to normalize this experience for them. When you lose someone you love, it's expected that this is going to be challenging and difficult for us. In terms of missing out on these rituals that can have an impact on us, that's pretty great. I'm also curious if we were to ask our children how they would like to honor their grandmother. If they were given the opportunity, in this case, you didn't get to experience the rituals of a funeral, is there a way to create your own memorial, your own sort of funeral that could bring meaning to your children and to your family? It's unfortunate that these things weren't able to happen, but there are ways to sort of honor our loved ones, and to hold on to those memories and create things on our own. And kids are really good at that. When we give them that space, they often surprise us as to what would be helpful for them. And by asking them, then we really are tapping into what their needs are. And when we listen to that, we can really get some great nuggets of information as to what they need.
Great, thank you. Zmira, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I will not add anything. That was very well said.
Thank you. It was. So here's a question. So what if my 7-year-old is doing fine, doesn't complain, accept changes, and is very understanding, including not having a birthday party? Should I be worried that he may not be expressing his emotions or just holding it in? Or am I just thinking or should I just not overthink it?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that's that's not easy to answer because I don't know the child, and it really depends on a lot of circumstances. But there are kids who are able to handle things well. Okay, we know that some kids have. I did mention that there are differences between kids, but there are kids who know how to handle things well, and that child may be handling things pretty well and just going with the flow. And you kind of can look back and see how your child has handled other things in the past, and how there must have been other disappointments or situations in which things did not go their way. Is this typical for your child to handle things in that way? And maybe this is the way the way they are. They're more easygoing, and they kind of able to do that. If you are concerned that that may not be the case, and you have seen changes within the child, that they did have other reactions in the past, you may just want to have them maybe express it in other ways. You may use art to have them maybe express their feelings through art. You may tell them a story that might have some nuances of emotions and feelings in them, and see if that triggers any sharing of information. But typically what I say as a psychologist, if your child is functioning well and their mood looks fine and they're doing well in the everyday kind of things that are expected for a child his age, I would say that the child is okay, right? Especially if it's your own child and you know them pretty well. They're sleeping well, they're, showing appropriate emotions in the appropriate time. They're managing to get through their schoolwork if they're school-age kids. That means they're coping. And we have to remember the kids can learn how to cope. We often kind of are surprised when they do cope, because we're expecting them not to cope. Mm-hmm. But kids are able to cope, and maybe this is the type of child who is able to get through it pretty well.
Great, thank you very much. So the next questions, there's 2 questions that people can actually see in the chat, and they're around teens, but I want to also kind of segue into our next slide, which you might want to show afterwards, which is some of the different resources that are available. Yeah. So I'll read this one question and then I'll let you answer it. But if you want to go to the next slide to talk about resources, that might be a good moment as well. So the question says, my teen, 15 years old, has become quite verbally aggressive and rude in the past 2 months. I have not seen her like this before, and she only wants to be alone, and she does not want to talk about if anything is bothering her. I'm wondering how I can help her, as she is evidently struggling with something, but since she doesn't want to open up, I don't know what it is. Should I just give her some space? So another question around teenagers.
Well, it depends how long the child is actually managing and experiencing these kind of symptoms. If it's a couple of months and it doesn't get any better, maybe there is maybe some reason for concern. Teens sometimes don't want to speak to their parents about how they're feeling. Often they do have things that they want to share, but maybe parents are not the right ones to share that with them. They feel sometimes that somebody else might be the right person. So if you are concerned, and it does sound that there is some concern there, I would recommend that maybe you have somebody else speak to them, some other person who is a mental health professional who can know how to go about and speaking to your child and kind of probing gently what is going on. Your child might be just very anxious or very has a lot of difficulty accepting a lot of the changes, or there might be something completely else going on. But if it's going on for a couple of months and it's not getting any better, I would recommend having someone speak to your child and try to figure out if there's anything that can be done to help.
Mhm.
Ben, there's an earlier question.
Sure.
How can we help our teens through this difficult time when the things that keep them going the most, sports and friends, are not an option to them, and they're not interested in spending extra time with mom and dad?
Mhm.
Again, another teen question.
Yeah. That's tricky. And I often think of parents of teenagers, because of course we all have our challenges, as parents, but developmentally speaking, teens are naturally at an age where, extra time with mom and dad is not necessarily what they're looking for. Unlike younger children where, for some kids this is really it's really a dream come true to have you know, um, all this time together. So, I think it goes back to sort of being that emotional coach sometimes for our kids, and just acknowledging that this is really hard. I can appreciate that you want to be with your friends, that you would rather be spending more time with them than you are, with us. And that's to be expected. So I think just validating that for our kids and letting them know that you get that, and that sometimes your requests may not always be what they're looking for, but maybe to also encourage them. We eventually do have to pivot and sort of start problem solving, as Zmira mentioned earlier. What are some things they do enjoy doing? How can they stay connected with their friends? How do they? Because they do. They're very good at that as well, as we know. So how are they managing to do that? And then, what kind of things can they sort of partake in outside of that peer connection that does bring them some joy? What are the small things in their homes, in their lives, that are making a difference for them? Do they like to journal? Do they like to write? Do they like to draw? Do they like to sing? Is physical activity a part of sort of their self-care? So again, it is a tough one because naturally this is where our youth want to be, and we're always constantly having to pull back the reins and keep them from doing these things given the circumstances that we're living.
Yeah, I would just like to add that as I mentioned before, the the moment your child is not allowing themselves to figure out how to deal with the situation, that's when things sometimes start becoming more difficult. Um, so that is a message that a teen can understand. It's okay to tell your teen, listen, we've tried to do the best we can. This is the situation. Now it's your turn to figure out what you can do to help yourself. And we can be here for you to brainstorm with you and to guide you through it. But you have two choices. You can either keep being sad and upset and wallow in your misery, or you can decide, maybe I can figure out a creative way to connect with my friends or develop some way to do things a bit differently. And when you have a good connection with your children, even though they might not be willing to share and open up, that connection with you allows them to listen to you when you say that, and allows them to then maybe see things in a different way. So I really feel like sometimes we need to be a little bit more forceful in terms of telling them that they can help themselves. We're not talking about young kids. I think that's something that we really need to do during this time, because I think that some of the changes that we're going through are not going to be remediated very quickly. And the faster we are able to help them with that, and they kind of feel that they have more control over the situation, we're helping them develop skills that will prevent them from becoming further anxious or further depressed over the next few months.
Great, thank you. So before we continue, I want to just say that I posted a link in the chat because time is flying by, And I think we only have time for one or two more questions, but we put together just a quick feedback survey, which does two things. So one is it will let us know how we did in terms of this particular webinar. But seeing that there were so many people present, it gives me a sense that this might be something we want to do again. And there is a chance for you to put in some suggestions for alternate topics that you might want to know about. So I do invite you to just fill out that feedback form. It is anonymous, and that would be really wonderful. So probably have time for one or two more questions. I see one that was just sent to me privately, and it actually is around a parent. And it says, the particular loss I'm feeling is related to my community. I used to be quite involved with a school and other community organizations, and now I feel so disconnected from everyone. I just feel sad. Any suggestions to feel more connected when the options are so limited?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think we're all, first of all, I want to empathize that we're all feeling a little bit disconnected in some way or another. And again, it's those, what can we do? What creative ways can we find to maybe figure out a way, maybe things that we never even thought of before. Maybe we can explore things that we haven't explored before. But that connection is very important. And I don't want to minimize that at all. There might be things that are out there that I'm not even familiar with. Janet, maybe you have any suggestions for someone like that who was very, a lot of the community things have changed substantially now.
Yeah. No, and that's the reality, right? And as someone just wrote in the chat too, like even when we are getting together, it is in this format, which is fantastic that we can still do this, but it doesn't necessarily fill that need that this person is expressing around connecting. But I guess what I would be curious to know is, though those typical things have sort of been removed from us, to kind of go back to some of those questions and ask yourself, how are you staying connected to it to some degree? You may not be coming together in that sort of grouped community fashion that you're used to, but you sound like a person who connection is very important to you. So I'm assuming you are finding ways to connect with people, even if it's not at the level that you're used to. So to think about what has been helpful for you. How do you stay connected? Is it through video calls? Is it through phone conversations? Is it going out for a walk and having a conversation with somebody while respecting the distancing rules? Sometimes simply having a conversation with our neighbor as we're leaving for work in the morning. I know that might sound trivial, but for me, these sort of moments of connection, even in passing, can really be helpful if we allow ourselves to sort of look at them in that way. But there's no way around it. We are missing that. And I also want to point out that we're living something pretty unique right now here in Quebec, and I know other provinces are unfortunately kind of following suit, it seems, with us. But we've been really kind of cut off for quite a while, and that's continuing. So it's real, and the concerns around sadness and loneliness and disconnect are valid. But I encourage us all to think about the ways that we still remain connected despite all of what we are living, because it's extremely important, as we know.
Great, thank you very much. So I think we have time for just one more question. It says, my son is concerned about going to school as I have health issues, and he's afraid that he'll bring COVID home. We've told him to follow protocols, but there has been some cases in the school that have caused him anxiety, and that has caused his anxiety to go up. Any suggestions on how to help him?
So I'll definitely weigh in on that one, because I've been dealing with many students like that, both in the elementary and high school. This is another situation that is real, and we can't always fix it completely. There is that fear that is real. We can't tell the student or the child, this is not when a child has a fear that's irrational, it's easy to challenge that fear and reason with the child how it's irrational and work with that. This is not an irrational fear. It is a true fear that the child has. There is a possibility that he may catch it in school and bring it home. So that makes it very, very tricky when we're working with that type of anxiety. However, when kids are able to reason through the understanding that they have no control over the situation, but that's okay, and we're protecting them as best as we can, then they may be able to come to terms a little bit with what it means. And we just have to keep reassuring them that, there are rules. We're trying to keep them as safe as they need to be. They can wear a mask, they can, keep distances and all the other things that we suggest. And then the chances are very small that something will happen. And that's where we kind of bring that stress a little bit down. The chances are that you will get it becomes much smaller, and we kind of even do it sometimes visually in terms of showing them what are the chances that if you keep to all the rules that you'll actually contract COVID. But it's great that you have a child who feels this way and you encourage them to go to school, because I know some parents who tend to end up keeping their kids home because of that. And that would really just escalate the avoidance, escalates the anxiety, and allows them to feel that this anxiety is even more real than it really is. So yeah, that's how I normally do it with families and kids, and we try and give them the sense that they're safe and encourage them to talk about it as well with us at school and with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jenna, did you want to say any last words on that?
Yes, so I put in there probably is other resources, but these are the ones that are more well known, and I think are the go-to ones that I would recommend. So obviously your local CLSC, I know there are waiting lists, but your local CLSC is a place that has, resources to help parents and kids. You can always go to your family doctor or your pediatrician. In most schools, there is someone who is designated as a mental health professional. I know in our school board, there's people like me and even other professionals who help. I know it's different from different schools and different school boards, but they are services in the school, and you can approach either the administration of the school or just your teacher. Can you put me in touch with someone who can help me support my child? And then there's a list of some organizations that give support, like Ami Quebec. And some websites with some very helpful information. We have the CEMH website there as well. I've put the website for the order if you are able to if you want to access a private psychologist. And if you are really concerned about serious suicide thinking in your child or in your teen, and I would definitely approach your doctor, your pediatrician for that, but you can also call Suicide Action Montreal that will guide you to the right places that you can access support for them.
Great, thank you very much. So it is 8 o'clock, time has flown. So I do want to thank Jana and Zmira very much for joining us, for sharing their expertise, and really just right from the start being very enthusiastic about this new format that we are doing, which is having a parent workshop over the internet, through Zoom. But I think it was really great. And I want to especially thank the parents that have joined us. And one benefit from this is that I know we have had parents and families joining us from all across the province in ways that often don't happen when we have a face-to-face session like this. So I want to thank you both so much for sharing. I want to thank all the parents for showing up, and I look forward to doing this again in another time. Jana and Zmira, any last words?
Thank you everyone for joining in. Yes, thank you for all the great questions.
Absolutely. Yes,
Wonderful.
thank you everyone. Your questions were fantastic. It was really nice to be with you this evening.
Sure, wonderful. Thank you so much. And just a quick note to everybody that registered, we'll send a follow-up email again with the link for feedback, and as well we'll include a PDF of this presentation as well if you wanted to look at it again and have access to these resources. So with that, I want to thank you very much, and have a really wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.